Hey guys, I'm Nicole, Chef de Cuisine at Traeger Grills. Today we're going to be running you through an awesome recipe for a classic green bean casserole. The great thing about this recipe, it's not your classic canned green beans and canned mushroom soup. We're going to do it all from scratch. So we've got fresh green beans. Going to get this water up to a boil, and while we do that, we'll get these cleaned. The trick to finding a good green bean is you want it to snap. So it should always sound super fresh and crisp. What we're gonna do is we're just gonna cut off the tip end of all of these. And then once our water's up, we're gonna blanch them. So blanching is just basically placing your veggies in boiling water. You cook them until they're still crisp, but they're tender. So they should be bright green, but you can bite through it. It still tastes like it's cooked, but it's still crisp and fresh. You want your water up to a rolling boil. One key with blanching is you want to make sure that your water is heavily salted. So I always season it, taste it. It should honestly taste like the ocean. That doesn't mean that's all going to come through in your finished dish, but you need to remember to season every step of the way. So we'll let that come back up. Typically, whatever you're blanching is going to be really cold, so it's going to drop the water temperature really quickly. So you want to make sure it's boiling and you don't overfill the pot. It'll take forever to get it back up, which ends up overcooking your beans. And we've got about 3 pounds of green beans here. As soon as they come out of the water, you want to put them in the ice. It just helps preserve the flavor and keeps them crisp. So we've got our ice water ready. These will usually take around 5 to 7 minutes to blanch. One of the biggest questions I have people ask all the time is how can you tell when they're done? I hardly ever go by time. The recommendation that I always give is to just try it. That's really the best way you can tell if it's there, is just take a couple out and give them a try. While those are blanching, we're gonna get our mushrooms ready. So we've got 3 different kinds of wild mushrooms here. I like to pick a few different kinds just to add in a different texture and different flavor. And then for mushrooms, they're basically like a sponge. So whatever you put them in, they're gonna soak it all up. I try to avoid rinsing my mushrooms with water as much as I can. When you rinse them in water, they end up soaking all of that up. And then when you go to saute, they're gonna release all of that moisture. So instead of sauteing them, you're basically just steaming them. And all that caramelization that you get in a saute is what makes it so good. So the best way to clean these is to I use a pastry brush, and you just brush out the gills on the bottom here of all the dirt. Let's check these green beans real quick. Usually to check them, I just pull 1 or 2 out and dump it in the ice and just give it a good snap. It should still have a lot of bite to it, but it should be a little bit more tender, a little bit more palatable. So these guys are good to go. You want to pull them out of the water and right into the ice. Otherwise, you'll end up with green beans that look like canned green beans. Once you get them in the ice bath, always kind of move them around a little bit. If you just leave them in a big lump, they'll have a hot pocket in the center, and they'll just continue to cook. Okay, so while I get these mushrooms ready, we're going to get our pan hot to saute. We're going to start with a little bit of olive oil and some butter. You can use one or the other if you'd like. All butter, all olive oil, any other fat that you prefer. I like the mixture of olive oil and butter. You just want these into bite-sized pieces. I like to leave them a little bit larger just to show the shape and give it a little bit more interest. And then on these shiitakes, same thing here, I don't want to cut them super thin. I don't want them to disappear. I want them to still have a bit of a bite and a shape. So I'm going to cut them a little thicker. And you can leave the stems on as well and slice right through those. The next thing we're going to do is mince some shallot. I like shallots a lot because they're a little bit more mild than a red onion. I think it gives it a really nice flavor profile, especially with mushrooms. Typically on onions and shallots, I always peel back 1 layer underneath the paper. So get all the paper off and then peel back the next layer. That next layer always seems to be a little papery as well and doesn't quite cook down. So then mincing shallots. So you're gonna start, I try to find a flat one. If it's not flat, I'll cut it in half and give myself a flat surface to work with. First, you're gonna go in horizontally, depending on what size you want your mince or your dice is gonna dictate how far those slices are apart. So we want a fine mince here, so we're gonna go pretty close together. And then you're gonna turn it towards you and do the same thing, the same width this way. And then you're just gonna go across this way. I think we're ready to go. So for this shallot, we just wanna soften it up and get a little bit of color on it. One thing to remember with things like this is to season every step of the way, along the way. A big mistake that a lot of people make is just seasoning at the very end, but you wanna season every single part of it as you go. So I'm cooking these over a medium-high heat. You wanna make sure that it's hot in the pan enough to break it down and caramelize it, but you don't wanna burn it. It's gonna spend a little bit of time in here, so you wanna let it hang out. So once your shallots start to brown a little bit, we're gonna add in the mushrooms. I'll add these in and then give them one good stir, and then I'll just let them sit for a while. If you move them around too much, they release all that moisture that we were talking about earlier. And then while these work, we're gonna get our shallots ready for the top of the green bean casserole. So for the fried shallots, I like to do these on a mandolin so they're really thin. I always do a couple test tries first and then check how thin they are. They should be pretty thin. You want them to get crisp. So we're just gonna throw these in a bowl with a little bit of rice flour. I use rice flour because I like the texture at the end. It's gluten-free, so that's a benefit as well. But if you wanna stick with regular flour, or you can use a mixture, you can season this mixture with whatever you like. You can use things like Old Bay, seasonal. I'm just doing rice flour and salt on these ones. We're gonna set those aside, check on our mushrooms. So on mushrooms, I always wait to season until the end. That salt will pull out a lot of the moisture and again, prevent you from getting that caramelization. We're gonna deglaze this pan with some sherry. We wanna pick up all of those little brown bits on the bottom. That's where all your flavor is gonna come from. So we'll add that in, and as that comes up to a boil, I just scrape the bottom of the pan to pick up all those little brown bits. We'll let that cook off a little bit. We're gonna add some rice flour, so that's gonna help thicken this up. You can use a roux if you like, which is just flour and butter. Again, I like the rice flour because it still thickens, but it keeps it gluten-free. And then we'll add in 2 cups of chicken stock and about a cup of cream. You just want it thick enough that either it'll coat the back of a spoon, or as you run your spoon through the sauce, it kind of parts a little bit. It's called au sec. We're gonna finish this with a little bit of Parmesan cheese. Something good to keep in mind as you're going, I always season along the way, but knowing I'm gonna finish with a salty cheese, I'll go a little bit lighter. And you want about a cup of shredded Parmesan here, not a packed cup, just a light cup. All right, so we'll stir this in. And then I always keep a thing of spoons on my table when I'm cooking, because again, you want to taste it all along the way. This is a dish that I hated as I was a kid. I wouldn't eat anything green. I wouldn't eat mushrooms. I wouldn't eat anything like that. But then when I started branching out, I made it from scratch on my own, and now I love it. So with our green beans, I just drained them off, but they're still kind of coated in water. One thing that I usually do with pastas, if I'm making a cream sauce, or in this case with the green beans, is I'll always add them into the sauce a little bit and let them cook in there for a minute so that the sauce really sticks to the pasta or to the green bean. So we've just got this on medium heat, and you don't want to take them too far because it's still got to go on the grill. but you just want to cook them long enough that the sauce starts to stick to the green bean. So I like to bake these in a big casserole. You could do it in a cast iron, you could do it anything that's oven safe or grill safe. Make sure you get all that sauce out. And then we're going to top it with some toasted almonds, and I'm going to do a little bit more grated Parmesan. We're going to take it out to the grill and let it cook for about 10 minutes on 375. While that's cooking, we're going to come back in and fry our shallots, and then we'll throw those on in the last 10 minutes. So we've had our grill preheating for about 10 to 15 minutes now. It's at 375. We're just going to pop this right in the center. And you want to let that bake for about 10 minutes, and then we're going to go finish our shallots and bring them on out. Okay, so while our green beans are baking on the grill, we're going to fry some shallots. I've got a pot of canola oil here. The key is to use an oil that has a high smoke point, so you wouldn't want to use something like olive oil for frying. I usually recommend canola or vegetable oil. I've got this set at 350 degrees, but you can have it anywhere between 325 and 350. And I always temp it with an instant read thermometer just to give you the best reading. So we're at 345 right now. When you add these into the pan, they're going to bubble up. So you want to make sure you leave enough room to account for that rise of the oil in the bubble. I'll usually drop one in just to test it first, and then follow with the rest. Now remember, these are super thin, so they're going to go relatively quickly. You just want like a light golden brown. As we pull them out, we're going to put them on these paper towels to drain off some of the excess oil. If you let them sit in it, they'll just get kind of soggy instead of crispy. All right, so you can usually tell when most of the moisture is gone because the bubbles subside a lot. So that'll tell you when they're cooked through and crispy. We're just gonna put them on here and spread them out. So we'll season these, and then we'll take them out to the grill and throw them on top. Okay, so our casserole's been on here for about 10 minutes. We're just gonna top it with our shallots and let it go just a little bit longer. You want to see that sauce kind of bubble up and thicken on the sides. So we'll give it about 10 more minutes and we're good to go. Okay, so we're at about 20 minutes now on 375. You can see our sauce is sort of thickening up and bubbling at the edges. That's exactly what you're looking for. Okay, so here's our finished product. This was after 20 minutes on the grill at 375. You should have a little bit of crisp over the top. We're going to scoop some of this out. One of my favorite things about this dish is the different textures. So your green beans will still be a little bit crispy. You've got the crunch from the almonds and the shallots on the top. The creamy sauce and the soft mushrooms. So good. Let's check it out. So good. Make sure you guys go to our website, traegergrills.com/recipes for this recipe and many more, or you can find them on our app.